It may only be October, but January's March for Life in Washington, D.C. will be here before you know it. And we now know what the 2018 March for Life theme will be.
Drum roll. This year, I'm excited to announce that the 2018 March for Life theme is Love Saves Lives.
That announcement was made at a Capitol Hill press briefing this week. March for Life President Jeannie Mancini says the theme Love Saves Lives points to how love and sacrifice go hand in hand. And panelists highlighted how love is at the core of the pro-life movement. The 2018 March for Life will take place on Friday, January 19th in Washington, D.C. And we also now know the commencement speaker for the March for Life conference held the day before. It will be Stephanie Gray, the woman whose recent pro-life talk at Google went viral. Take a listen.
It seems generally the people who are inspiring have suffered in some way, or they face some sort of obstacle, or some sort of challenge, or some sort of difficulty. And what sets them apart from those who don't inspire is how they respond to their suffering.
Stephanie Gray's talk at Google centered on what qualities lead us to call someone inspiring and how to link that with how we can dialogue about abortion. We recently spoke with Stephanie Gray from Vancouver and British Columbia, Canada, and asked if she was surprised by the Google invite.
I was surprised initially, but when I looked at the series of presenters that they have brought into their organization, I realized they really do bring in people on the range of the political spectrum. So it was a joy to have the opportunity. And I have to say, the message was very well received. People were quite quiet, actually, very respectful, had insightful questions, but expressed no hostility or anything that I sometimes face on the college campus.
As you mentioned, there have been many other talks at Google, including one from Planned Parenthood President Cecile Richards. Her talk on YouTube, as of this interview, has under 2,000 views. Your talk, which has been up for a shorter period of time, has nearly 100,000 views. What do you make of the comparisons between you two?
Well, you know, I think it's a testimony of the power of God, really, because I put it to prayer and I said, God, if you want this message to go around the internet, you use your almighty power to do so. And I think the reality is Cecile Richards' message is the status quo, whereas the pro-life message is something we're trying to get the culture to embrace. So there's, I think, more enthusiasm, more movement behind getting that message in the public square in order to shift our culture of death to a culture of life.
Do you find that the pro-life message resonates more with people?
I think at the end of the day, the pro-life message does resonate more with people because it's ultimately the message that's written on each of our hearts. That sense we all have intuitively that we ought to put others ahead of ourselves, that we ought to do the right thing even when it's hard. And that was ultimately the message I was communicating, which most aligns with the anti-abortion position to protect the weak and vulnerable and care for them, even when it's difficult for us to do so.
Stephanie, your talk centered around the idea there are 3 qualities that define inspiring people. What was your strategy behind that narrative to discuss the tricky topic of abortion?
You know, coming from the perspective that the truth is written on our hearts, I honestly look at it from this way. Everyone is pro-life, they just don't know it. And so when you communicate through the question of who inspires you and why, what you end up drawing out of people are those fundamental truths written on their heart. As I mentioned, that idea that we should put others ahead of ourselves, that we should do the right thing even when it's hard, and that third principle being that we should have perspective, realizing we can always control our response even when we can't control the situation. And those are 3 qualities inspiring people have that all people, regardless of where they sit, on which side of the fence they sit on when it comes to the abortion debate, all of us can embrace those 3 qualities. So what I wanted to do was tap into that shared perspective, that common ground, and then show how those 3 qualities are best demonstrated through the pro-life perspective, caring for the vulnerable preborn child who needs us, and her dependency heightens our responsibility toward her.
Most Catholics, Stephanie, and most pro-lifers do not work in Catholic or pro-life environments. So what advice might you have for our viewers who want to spread the pro-life message in a compelling way in their workplace?
You know, there's that saying, bloom where you're planted. And I actually think the unsung hero in this whole Talks at Google pro-life presentation is the staff member at Google who initiated the whole process. And he was the one, as a staff member, who just submitted my name because he was familiar with my work and suggested me as a speaker. So here he is in a corporate environment that's non-sectarian. And I think that's an example for everyone listening, wherever you're placed. If you're in the teaching field, the field of social work, the field of medicine, maybe none of those fields, you work in an office, you can always ask a colleague, what do you think about abortion? Did you read that headline in the news? What's your perspective? And get that conversation going. And then if someone thinks, well, I'm not equipped to dialogue with someone, you know, that's where I say, well, my book, in which people can get at loveunleasheslife.com, has all the material they need to know how to have fruitful, effective conversations like the presentation I communicated at Google.
Stephanie Gray, president of Love Unleashes Life, thank you for spreading the pro-life message in such a compelling way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Since we've spoken with Stephanie, the number of YouTube views on her Google Talk continue to rise, now reaching over 100,000.